All right, we've got everybody coming in. Welcome, welcome. We'll give everybody just a minute to make sure that they're logged in. Then I'll introduce Miha. Okay. Hey, welcome everybody. We're very excited about this event, and I would like to introduce you to you, Miha Andric. And we sent you some information on him. We're super excited to have him here. He's a world-renowned coach, and he's coached our kids as well as many of the others that are on this call for our World Schools. Participants that have done that. And he coaches all over the world and has just got a fantastic perspective. I went to one of his judge orientations when we were doing World Schools, and it was the best judge orientation I'd ever been to, and I couldn't stop talking about it. So when we decided to do this very unique tournament where we are doing decision in rooms, I thought of Miha. And so he has graciously agreed to come and to do this training for us. So he will be teaching for about an hour, and I'll let Miha take it from here on how you want to run that with questions. But we did reserve about 30 minutes at the end for any direct questions for Miha. So Miha, that was very brief. If you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit more detail about yourself before you kick it off, and I'll turn it over to you.
Cool. Thank you much for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I'm Miha. I always say that my American Starbucks name is Mike, so you can also call me Mike. I'm otherwise a philosopher, sociologist. For 15 years, I was coaching. In Europe, I was mostly coaching World Schools debate and parliamentary debate. These two are the most let's say spread debate formats around the world. So I was coaching teams to world championships, like international tournaments and so on. And when I'm in US, I also do LD policy, a bit of public forum and other formats. What else to say about me? In last 5 years, I'm not actively coaching my teams, school teams or private teams. I act as a guest teacher, guest lecturer, guest trainers. I help setting up debate programs. I also do a lot of corporate trainings that are connected to speaking, critical thinking, and so on. I do a lot of online coaching, and I'm really glad to be here with you today to do a bit of judge training. Thank you to all of those who have your cameras on. I appreciate that. It's nice to speak to people and see their reactions, right? Because I claim, the best debaters are those who are able to respond and react to, maybe even unconscious facial expression of the judges that they see while they are speaking. So that's great. Now, I do have a lot of things I would want to tell you. We have 3 debate formats that we want to cover. So what I'll do, I'll just start and speak for 1 hour. And then if there are questions, comments, criticisms, proposals for discussions, let's do it like this together. Maybe at the beginning, right? I do that at majority of my trainings. I ask participants, do you have like specific questions that maybe you would want me to address? That is also a nice communication trick from teachers, I think, because if I ask you at the beginning, what would you like me to speak about? That means that I give you a lot of power. You can, direct me, but you also need to take the responsibility. So if you now don't, direct me somewhere, then in the end, you can't say that the training was not interesting and useful because you had the chance, to say what you want to hear. So if, you're not happy with what you heard, your own fault. I bought you some time now. So if there are any questions, you can unmute yourself or maybe just write into the chat. I think that this option is enabled. Yeah, I'll give you a few seconds. If there is anything particularly that you would want me to address, I will do that. Otherwise, of course, I'll just start with something. I will tell you, okay, in between opening my screen. Do you see my screen? So you see, these are all the things I wanted to talk about today. And after I told you that I'm a philosopher, 12 points for a philosopher in an hour, that's a lot. I will do my best. Okay, since there are no questions, that I would start with things. So why did I do these things, right? Because that's the first training I have with you. I don't know I don't know your experience. Thank you, Theresa. I will cover RFD, which is, I agree, the most important thing for debaters. I absolutely agree. I will cover that. But I want to start somewhere at the beginning with basics. Then I want to build out of that. If you will, in between think that I'm speaking about stuff that is just too basic, then, just write me a comment. I will not take it personally. And say, please go on. Like, we already know that. If you think that something will be too complicated, let me know. I just want to say things that I realized judges are having problems with when I go around the tournaments as chief adjudicators, as judges training, as coaches trainer, and so on. So these are now the things that I've decided to speak about that I see people have problems with, right? So firstly, I would want to briefly go through, I hope you all know that, but I would want to go through what, is a role of a judge, right? And why I think this is important, because I think the role of the judge or the roles the judge have should follow in this order of priority that it's written on my screen on the left, right? The first thing is you need to follow the debate, right? And that means that you that you need to take notes. And what does it mean that you did follow a debate well? That you are able in the end do a summary, and that you are able to discuss with debaters what has happened during the round. That means that you follow the debate, right? I will not challenge your capability of multitasking or something like that. But even if you're able to multitask, please do not try to multitask while you're following the debate. Do not play with your phone. Do not read newspaper. Do not do stuff. I'm not saying I don't trust you multitasking, but I know the debaters, especially those who are going to lose, right, will not trust your multitasking. So let's not lose the accountability just because of that, right? So make sure that you follow the debate. That's your first thing. As I know from Kimberly, or the tournament director, right, you will have some help during the rounds on with the rules and how the debate needs to turn out and what is the order of speeches and so on. So, make sure that you know what's happening. But the first thing, listen to what's happening. Second thing, in my opinion, the most important thing that you need to have in your head, decide who wins the debate. You are not a teacher who is evaluating individual performance of speakers primarily. You are not a coach who is looking at debaters and see who is a better debater. You are not a parent who is, comparing your kid to the debaters that you have just seen. You are a judge who sees two sides of the debate, affirmative, negative, government opposition, and you do a holistic comparative analysis. Of course, this is a bit different in different formats and different debate events. I will address this later. But more important, that in evaluating how did that debater do, did debater did something wrong, yada, yada, yada. More important than that is to have a holistic comparative overview, like which side did a better job, which side was more persuasive. I think that, of course, related to that is assigning speaker scores and team scores, right? Here is where you do act as somebody who is, evaluating the performance in accordance with the criterions that you have on ballot and in accordance with the rules of the format. But I think that your primary job absolutely needs to be, right, seeing which side was more convincing, right, on a holistic level. Then you need to be able to provide reason for decision and deliver feedback. Here, oral explanation of what somebody did right, what they did wrong, why did somebody lose and win. Here, you need to act like, as a neutral observer. We know that. Important thing is that I already, since there was a question on RFD, when you are explaining reason for decision, when you're explaining your holistic comparative, right? Use comparative language, because sometimes debaters will say they didn't tell us why we lost, and then I will speak with judges and they will say, oh, of course I did tell them. So sometimes you do have a good reason why you decided, but you're not communicating that reason with the debaters. I'll give you an example that is one of my traumas. I'll tell you an anecdote of how my team lost an international championship in finals, right? I thought I was listening to debate. I thought we were winning. I thought it was a close debate. It was a parliamentary debate. I thought we were winning, right? And then we lost. And then I went to discuss with the judge, one of the judges, to see why did we lose, right? And I got furious because of the reasons that the judge explained to me, but because of the way the judge was explaining his reasons. He said, well, Miha, Mike, your team did not develop the second argument well enough. There was a missing link and no evidence. And I was like, yeah, I know that. I already told them that before you gave the decision. That was totally bad. But why did we lose? Oh, and your second speaker dropped one argument. And I'm like, yeah, I totally told them. They didn't rebuild the argument. They didn't follow up. I get it. That was so bad. Why did we lose? Do you see where I'm getting to, right? Just an individual critique, analysis of what did they do wrong, what they could do better. That's it. That's the analysis of their individual performance. Use it when you're scoring speakers. Use it when you're giving them feedback. But when you are telling them who won the debate, it needs to be comparative. So that's why I have the priority. I'm always comparing two sides. And secondly, use comparative language. Sometimes, as I'm saying, maybe you do have a comparative reason, but you don't explain it comparatively or neutrally, right? So, for example, at one of the tournaments that I was just running 2 weeks ago in Houston, we had a big issue because one of the judge said, to quote, because I was in the room listening to the decision, one of the judges said, one team won because there was some sort of controversial debate about gender and all this. And, these debates might get heated and controversial. And one just said, I voted for one side because they were the only one who were basing their principles in science. And then the other coach filed in a complaint because the other coach said that judge was not neutral. That judge said what is science, what he believes in science, and then according to this, he made the decision and evaluated the arguments. Then I went to speak with the judge, and the judge explained me, no, Miha. It was like one team, gave the explanation, gave scientific evidences, gave some warrants, gave some examples. The other team was just empty rhetoric, just statement after statement after statement. So this is why I said that I was convinced by scientific approach versus empty rhetorics. And then I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Please, let's go and re-explain it to the team now. And after we got that done, they were like, okay, we get it now. We understand why did we lose. So you see, sometimes you have a good reason, but you simply don't explain it comparatively. So that will be one of my biggest advices. Think comparatively, think holistically what's happening in the round in any of the formats, as far as I'm concerned, and make sure that that you also express that. And then in the end, you can always, depends on time, depends on actual procedures that you will do at this tournament or any other tournament that you are at, right? You can also give individual additional feedback to teams or to speakers, right? In these situations, that even can be a part of your short reason for decision speech, right? You can make a little note. Oh, and the second speaker could do this better. Oh, and I don't know, the third speaker, in the second speech, there was one argument dropped. Well, you can do these observations, but keep in mind that's not reason for decision. And keep in mind that you can act like a parent, coach, teacher, because you have the expert knowledge and you want to, make them grow. That's fine. Just if you want to tell this to them, make sure that you say the reason for decision was that, just comparative analysis of what you said. Now I, as somebody who knows something on the topic or have experience on the topic or simply have an opinion on the topic, now I want to, or simply know something about debate, I want to tell you something on how you could get better. So here you're acting as a coach, acting as a mentor, acting as a parent, giving them advices for improvement. Make sure that if you do that, that this is not a part of your reason for decision speech, because there you need to be neutral adjudicator, neutral observer that comparatively decides. A short comment on all these. Everybody can be a debate judge, right? Because these are still relatively young kids. right? And if you can argue with them at home, if you can argue with them in schools, that means that you can also evaluate how well they are arguing, right? You don't need to be a debate expert. You just need to know like few little tricks to help you judge. You just need to know what the format demands from kids, just so that you have easy time following the debate. However, otherwise, the way I, as a teacher, as a debate coach, as a judge, the way I approach judging, I don't care what the topic is. I don't want to know anything about the topic. I just sit down, take my piece of paper, and I'm like, please convince me. Like, and keep in mind, if you don't understand something, they might sound smart, expert, like using expert evidence, expert language. If I don't understand them, I tell them, guys, I'm sorry you lost because I didn't understand what you're telling me. I'm so sorry if I'm dumb. That could be your criticism. You can go around and start saying Mr. Mike is dumb because he didn't understand us. I'm fine with that. But it's a debate communication activity. It's on them to communicate something with you. It's on them to convince you. So it's perfectly fine that your feedback is, I did not understand that. Of course, make sure that you follow the debate. Of course, make sure that if you don't understand, it's not just because you didn't pay attention or you didn't write down something that might be important. Make sure that you are, very critical and observant in that sense. However, they need to persuade you. They need to communicate this with you. Anybody can be a debate judge. And as Kimberly has so nicely put in the video that went over the formats that or events that you will be running at this tournament, right? The goal of the activity is that, debaters speak to every man and every woman on the street, right? So that's why, if I don't understand them, then probably majority of women and men on the streets cannot. The same goes for you, right? So that would be some sort of basic thing. Okay, quickly through things that are important for being an perfect, excellent judge model, and then the mistakes that I observe are happening in, I'd say, last 3 to 5 years when I'm traveling, mostly US tournaments, did I choose to come up with mistakes. Of course, be impartial. If you have some sort of relation with debaters that are debating, I don't know, you are in actual relation with them or we're coaching them or however, if possible, speak to the tournament people, administration, directors. Even if you, again, as with multitasking, I'm not saying I don't trust you that you can judge objectively, but others won't trust you, right? And, tournament losing accountability, tournament losing the face in front of debaters and so on. So make sure that you report that you were assigned to judge somebody that you are affiliated with somehow. And the tournament people, who is the people who are leading the tournament, at any tournament, will make a decision whether they still want you to judge or not. Be observant, right? Absolutely. Like we said that. I just want to go through all the thing. Now, make sure that you avoid any personal biases, right? I know that sounds logical, but this is not like it's hard to do it sometimes, right? Like, if I would now start talking about examples, and if I would bring in something on Trump, something on gender, something on tariffs, something on guns, it would get heated very quickly, right? Because all the people have nice, strong opinions on that. Make sure that you avoid any personal biases. And secondly, avoid any expert knowledge. I don't care if you're a lawyer, if you're a parent and you know better on parenting than what this debater was saying about parenting and parenting policies. If this is a parliamentary debate, could be a topic on parenting, on raising up children. I don't care if you're an economist, philosopher, environmentalist, whatever, right? Your expert knowledge should and does not matter. What matters is, you being an average neutral voter, average intelligent neutral voter, looking at the crazy decisions that people in Europe and all across the world are doing within their votes, and how votes are going all around the political spectrum. It's hard to say what is an average intelligent voter, but I think that we know what we mean, right? So let's not make a big drama out of that, because I think that, of course, there could be a philosophical discussion of what does that mean, but like, make sure that you don't use expert knowledge. keep in mind, if you do have expert knowledge, after you make your reason for decision, right, after you explain comparatively why one team lost, please give them everything. Like when I hear an LD debate on utilitarianism versus deontological ethics, and then they tell me something to me as a philosopher, and then give me explanation that A is wrong, B is just too simplistic, then I'm saying, okay, let me hear what you have to say. Let me compare what you've said. But then after that, I'm like, okay, but now I'm a philosopher. Let me tell you how it is with these ethical frameworks. Or if you're a lawyer, let me now tell you how these legal system works. Yada, yada, yada. Very important. Do not step in or do not read into the debate. That is a very, very obvious principle, but not that easy to follow. For example, right? If I make a stupid argument that to you is obviously wrong, I don't know if I make always when I give examples, by the way, I give examples that are very easy, simple, stupid, so that we know what I mean about. In debate, you are probably going to hear a bit more complex examples, but I always like to use easy examples so that we are all on the same page. So for example, if one team said, a black market never happens if you make one substance illegal or like one product illegal, because the states are just capable of, making sure that the black market is not, even if people want to buy stuff illegally, the states, generally governments all around the world, they have the mechanisms to deter that, to prevent that. I think that it's common knowledge to us, right, that this simply is not true. I think we all agree on that because we see the examples of illegal market, black market. However, if the other team does not refute this argument, does not say anything about that, the other argument is standing. So you can say argument was not well explained. That's why it's not persuasive, does not have logical links, does not have evidence, is not even intuitive to me. So you can give low grades for the quality of argument. But in a sense of comparative analysis, you can't read in the debate and refute the argument for them, right? Also, you're not allowed to, you should not make conclusions for them, right? So in that sense, you should be, I was saying you need to be observant, you need to be active. You also should be a bit lazy, because when we are listening to other people, right, we make conclusions for them. Right. So, for example, if I talk with Kimberly, who's running this tournament, right, and she gives me an argument, I'm not like, Kimberly, I think you didn't explain me anything. I understand what you mean, but please go through all the links. I'm not like that. I make conclusions for her because she knows, I know she knows, and we just follow with the conversation. However, in debate, you're not allowed to do that, right? So if somebody tells you, people will still buy the cigarettes on the black market, even if we make them illegal, all right? And then they stop here. That means that you, on your piece of paper, the only thing that they have proven you is that there will be black market. They didn't say whether that's bad. They didn't say whether that's good. They didn't compare it to a non-black market situation, nothing. So you can't say that one team, so it would be a bad analysis of that debate if you would say one team presented a harm of black market, because they didn't present any harm. They just said the black market will happen. Maybe they have proven you that, but you cannot read in the negative impact, even though it's intuitive to you, right? I'm giving simple, stupid examples now, just so you know what I mean. Do not read in the debate. Know the rules of the format, right? Because debaters are going to, follow up maybe with some jargon and so on. So read the rules, read all these things. We said be an average intelligent voter. And keep in mind that there are no automatic losses, right? I mean, of course, if there are rules violations, as it was said in your basic instruction video, make sure that you report that to the tournament leadership and they will, talk with you what to do. However, you can't just say, oh, bad argument, automatic loss. Oh, not response to this argument, automatic loss. Compare the things, right? Make sure that one team is more persuasive than the others. On average, I think that's the best approach to judging. Now, quickly through biggest mistakes in all the three formats that you are running on this tournament that I've seen recently. Number one, over prioritizing later speeches, and I'll join the two, accelerating rebuttal and engagement marks. What I mean by that? sometimes judges, especially if they're not experienced, or to be honest, also very experienced ones, right? They simply like later speeches in debate better, or they simply like those speeches who are refuting the other team and engaging with the other side much more. Why? Well, of course, because it's more engaging, because it's more funny, because it's more interesting, because it seems like something is happening, right? So, if the first debaters say, I don't know, US should do that because this will increase GDP, because this will make US being an important actor in a global international stage. The other team said, yes, but this is against the rules of international law. That's like boring. Usually when you hear a topic, yeah, on one hand, one argument, on the other, I know what you bring in. But then it got heated when the team starts comparing, when they start engaging, when they start saying, they made a mistake here, they don't have the impact here, yada, yada, yada. This is where it gets interesting. And just because it's more interesting, just because it's more engaging, it doesn't mean that that's a better speech, because different speakers have different roles in the debate, right? So that's why you need to read the rules of the format. If the role of the first speaker is to present the arguments, to construct the arguments, for example, in LD, to bring some value, to show what's the criterion over which you're going to evaluate if you're achieving your value, and then to offer some constructive arguments or contentions that are proving that they are achieving value on their side, right? And they have no engagement. You can't say, well, you offered some good arguments, but you didn't engage. You didn't say what the other thing. No, you need to adjudicate debate according to the role of the debater, role of the speaker in the debate, right? So they have a good speech if they fulfill their role in the debate. Make sure that you don't overemphasize a single judging criterion, right? On the ballot, you will have persuasiveness, evidence. We will go through them briefly. Delivery, organization, cross-examination, right? Make sure that you understand that these 6 together, they always create some sort of persuasiveness of a speech, or the not persuasiveness, because that is a separate criterion, to be honest. However, they create like the answer to the question, how well did that speech advance the debate? Did something happen? Is the side benefiting out of that? Don't just, go to one argumentation evidence. It's a holistic evaluation of everything together. One that I really want to, two that I really want to emphasize. Holding preconceived expectations about the resolution. If you hear the resolution in advance, if you were coaching this resolution in advance, if you debated this resolution in advance, whatever, nobody cares, right? If I put it like that. Nobody cares what you think would be good to do on that topic. Nobody cares what you think are the best arguments on that topic. Nobody cares what your debaters, your son, other coaches did on that topic. We only care what debaters have said. Like it would be a transcript of the things they have said, right? Of course, in the last part, you can tell them what you would do. That's the little coaching part in the end, a little expert mentorship in the end. But don't have the preconceived ideas on, like, I'm not saying personal bias. I'm just saying maybe a very debate preconceived ideas. Sometimes, especially parents that start judging, or some new coaches, when the motion is announced for party debate, when they have 15 to 20 minutes to prepare, sometimes parents come to me, oh, Mike, can you please explain us what is this motion about so that we will know how to judge? I'm like, no, I don't want to explain it to you. I don't even want to know what the topic is, to be honest, because I want to listen to the debaters. They will explain you what the topic is. So not just that you should not have preconceived ideas, right? It is better not to have any ideas about a topic. Don't adjust for the unfair or unbalanced resolutions. Everybody claim we never do that. I see at every tournament somebody does that, right? You see a resolution and the debate is close, right? Both teams are good, or both debaters in LD are good. And then even if you don't admit that, sometimes the judges are like, I think that NEG had harder job to do. I don't even know what could be the arguments on that side. So that is why, I was less harsh to that side. And because it was very close, because they had harder job, they win. No, you need to judge the motion as it would be fully fair. You already know the motions in advance for LD and policy. You don't know the motions for parley, right? Because they're going to be announced 15 to 20 minutes before the round. So for these topics, it can happen that you're like, oh my, I don't even know what I would speak about, like what I would say on the neg or gov or op, whatever, right? And if that's the case, right, maybe that's true. Maybe they will give you an unbalanced, unfair motions. But if you think so, speak with the tournament leadership after the debate. Judge the debate as the motion is perfectly fine, right? Because otherwise, if you do that, you create even more unfair situation, because then the other team is not guilty that they are on the other side of the topic, the easier side, right? So you should not adjust for that. Last thing, one big mistake that I see with new judges or parents that are judging, that they lack confidence and accountability, right? Debaters are debaters. They like to argue, right? So what that means, especially if you have oral adjudication in the rooms, if you explain, you will have a debater saying, oh, no, but we said this, blah, blah, blah. And then if you're not confident, what might happen could be, oh, yeah, maybe, now I see you truly did say that. Don't ever do that. You are not going to change your decision because you're already going to give your ballot, right? So this is how the procedure is, right? And you're not going to change your decision just because the debater said something to you, right? So the moment when you start saying, well, I see what you mean, maybe I made a mistake, the whole tournament loses the accountability. You lose the accountability as a judge, and you're also not helping with anything. So if this happens, right, just say this was my decision, I explained it as I did, maybe try to re-explain it, but then you can stop discussion with debaters. You're not there to discuss with them. If you have issue, right, you can go to the tournament leadership, or I will give you my email. You can send me an email. Miha, I think I did a terrible mistake. What do you think? I promise I will respond if it will not be midnight in my time zone where I'm going to be at a time. However, what I'm saying, discuss this with other people, but don't show lack of confidence and accountability in front of debaters. Because then, not just that you will not correct your mistake, what will still happen is that now additional negative harm will happen. Okay, running briefly through, these are the judging criterions, right? You have all these on your ballots. I just want to go briefly through them, right? These are the points on which you're gonna give individual speaker points, and these are also the main thing that you're looking at the each debate format when you are evaluating. The thing that, so what additionally, I want to tell you, these like things that we are going to go through now, these are not just evaluation criteria and points that you are going to give for each criteria, or each of the 6 criterion. You can always give 1 to 5 points to the debaters, right? So in the end, each debater can, for each speech, get 30 points. Now, let's go briefly through like these criteria. Oh, my point. Also take these 6 criteria in each of the debate format, not just at criteria for giving points, but also some sort of, standardized criterions of how you analyze and report on your analysis of the debate after the debate, right? So, if debaters ask you or other coaches ask you, or if you want to give a reason for decision, you got a brilliant like little formula and format of how to give oral feedback by Kimberly, right? By the tournament leadership. But if you can't explain it in that way, right? You always can use in policy debate. Okay, I will explain persuasiveness. I will address evidence. I will address cross-examination. I'll address delivery. I'll address refutation, yada, yada, yada. So these could also be like your standardized ways of how to approach the, evaluation, report on the debate, yada, yada. Okay, quickly, briefly through. Persuasive, let's firstly go to policy, right? Important thing in policy debate is, as you see, that's a big difference to the other two, right? That is truly an evidence-based format, right? So debaters here will need to give you evidence, and if their evidence is not good, if it's out of context, if the other team has counter evidence, this is where the debate is going to break down. So why does this policy debate, prioritize evidence? Because the idea of policy debate is that the judge, this is now important, acts as a policymaker who have access to all the evidence and needs to make a rational decision. So if you are judging policy, imagine, okay, so there is a policy somebody's proposing. Somebody on the other side does not like the policy. Now I will read all the evidence, will listen to all the arguments, and simply in the end, I need to make a decision solely based on the information that they provide. Right? So you're a policymaker that decides based on the evidence, 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 evidence. Then you, in every debate, as in every debate format in policy, you have the refutation. I'm going to address quickly later how to evaluate refutation. Then you have delivery and organization, which is also, as you see, the same in every debate format. Delivery means how you deliver. Delivery means, the way their hand gestures were, the way their eye contact was, their things in their speaking style that make their content more persuasive. So general idea on having average delivery is very easy. If the debater, was doing the speech in a way that this was understandable to you so that you were able to follow the debate, that means that their delivery was at least average. Why? Well, because the point of delivery is to deliver. And if they deliver, that means it was at least average. If, they were using, tonality, pace, hand gesture, movement, eye contact with you, if they were using additional things, to make their points more persuasive, then you can see, okay, you can say that's a more persuasive delivery. Of course, there are many different things, many different styles that could be persuasive in terms of delivery. Few of the things that are, from the public speaking perspective, always persuasive delivery is, don't be like, make some changes in your speeches. Don't say anything in the same tonality, with the same pace, with the same volume, and so on. Make changes. This is what makes your delivery good. Make sure that you're not too fast, right? So that people can understand you. Make sure that your facial expressions and your hand gestures or whatever you're doing reflect the things that you are speaking about. So, for example, if I tell you that I'm now going to address 3 debate formats, I show you 3 debate formats, first, second, third. So what am I simply doing with my facial expressions, with my hand gestures? I'm kind of, pointing to things. So that's delivery, like very basic thing. Organization, I also think that you don't need to complicate here. Organization is how very clear is their speech. Do they divide their speech in more parts? Are they using signposting? We call this in the debate, right? Do they say, now I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to bring in the contention. Now I will give you the definitions, right? Do they, after they're done with their contention, do they say, after I have just explained you the second argument, let me now move to the next one? So organization, in terms of clarity, organization can also be strategy. Let's say that, the team has two own contentions, arguments, and the other team has 3 arguments running in the debate, right? Let's say that they have 5 arguments. Let's say that only 2 arguments are really important in this round because all the others are not important, not impactful, are already a passé in this debate. A good organization, good strategy for the debater that is now following up in debate would be to speak about the 2 most important arguments, because this is what's interesting in the debate now. This is what will make them win the round. So the organization is also strategical prioritization. Are they able to focus to the most important issues to the debate, or are they just randomly covering everything that they've heard, right? Okay. Now, the things that are different, right? In policy, we said evidence, evidence, evidence. Did they quote? Did they read the evidence verbatim, right? Did they have a full citation? You're also allowed to ask them to provide you with the full citation later on. However, now if we go to Lincoln Douglas, how do you use evidence there? You use it, they still need to have citations, quotations, sources, but you use evidence there more as a support for a value statement, right? So it's not just evidence-based, but you still need citations, you still need sources, still need to be read full, all this, but you use it as a support, right? In parliamentary debate, you do use evidence as a support, but analysis is more important than evidence. So analysis should be prioritized in parliamentary over the evidence. I will explain this in a second, right? Why is that so? Look, the parliamentary debate is, we call it a conversational debate format that is focused on big clash, on two big perspectives of how the world should look like, right? And they need to characterize this world, and then it's on them how they are going to explain you why something is better, right? And it's great if they use examples for something, but if you have example versus the analysis on the other side, you will go for the analysis, because the point of parliamentary is not a competition in good research, it's a competition of quick thinking and quick responding, right? I'll give an example of that. Let's say that I have a debate. This house supports China's investments in Africa. From government, I'll get the argument that China is doing great things because they're building infrastructure in Africa, right, which helps African people. On the other side, I get the argument, no, China is doing very bad things, because they are, just using African people as their workforce. They are not all the infrastructure they build there is actually very bad. They can't even use it. And here are three examples of how China did that. So now I have statement and then a statement with an evidence. Now at this point, opposition is winning because they have statement plus some evidence. Now the government comes back and the government says, well, we don't have an evidence for that. However, what we claim is that it is in a rational economic incentive of China to develop Africa positively and give them good infrastructure to use. Why? Because China at this moment does not have high economic growth, or not, at least not as they would want it, and they need new markets so that they will spread their economy. Does not look good with US, Europe, or Russia, so they need new markets so that they will spread, which means that there is a rational economic incentive that China has that points to the fact that China, wants to develop the infrastructure there. And then the other team said, oh, no, but we had two examples. In this case, you have two examples and you have analysis. In parliamentary, you will absolutely go with the analysis if this is like that. In policy, you will go with evidence, because one is trying to, base everything on research, on like expert quotation, because you are, as we said, official policy maker who will decide based on provided evidence. In parliamentary, you are a voter who will make a decision, right? And it's about persuasiveness. Okay. Now, what is another difference is, of course, right, that if policy is about actual policy that's being proposed, if parliamentary, it's about two different worlds that are characterized by people in the debate. It could be this house believes Mr. Mike is better debate coach than the X person. It could be this house believes that US should step out of NATO. It could be this house believes that permissive parenting is bad. It's not necessarily policy. Could be value, could be policy, could be fact. Doesn't matter. Debaters need to characterize what you have on both sides, right? And then they will debate. In Lincoln Douglas, right, I would say it's somewhere in the middle. In Lincoln Douglas, it's about value argumentation. What does that mean? It means that, if I push it, I would say that the judge needs to act not as a policymaker, not as an objective, neutral voter, but as a neutral, a moral philosopher, right? Who is now going to make a value-based decision. Now, trust me, I know the judges are not going to act as neutral moral philosophers. So let us adapt this definition of how the judge should act a bit. I would say it should act as a neutral observer who tries to make a moral value-based decision on a resolution that is suggested, right? And debaters in Lincoln Douglas, right, are asked to do three simple things. Firstly, to have a value that they are defending. Then secondly, to have a criterion over which they're going to decide whether they're achieving this value or not. And lastly, to have some contentions when they prove that their side of the topic, according to the criterion that they have, is simply, achieving that value. Let's say that the topic is violent protests in democracy are justified, right? I've seen that topic in LD at one of the tournaments in Europe, right? Europe is always more radical with this violent protests, right? So I've seen that topic, right? And now I'm thinking, winging it, what could be the case that that LD debater does on F, right? They could say, well, our value is democracy. We gonna fight for democracy. Okay, then they need criterion, because I as a judge will be okay. I kind of like democracy, but how do I know if you got more democracy than the other team? Right? And that's why they will say my criterion over which I will evaluate whether we are getting more democracy or not is, I don't know, more human rights respected and more people voting and representing their voice. This is a criterion. Now I know. And then they need to give me contention, right? Contentions. Only violent protests can give voice for some groups of people, right? I don't know. I imagine they made some sort of, such contention. What will the NEC do? What do you expect and what do you judge a NEC to do, right? Firstly, they can say, we have a different value. We don't think democracy is the most important value. We think that safety is more important than democracy. We think that personal safety or private property, if you wish, or autonomy and safety of your own body is more important than democracy. And that will be our value. So they can directly address democracy as a principle. They have a second option. They can address criterion. They can say, well, we don't think that it's about human rights in democracy. We think it's about whether the will of people, the majority, is represented or not. Right? So violence usually done by, small little groups. So that's not majority. Why would we have it? I don't know. They can suggest different value, different criteria. They can say their side is better achieving the same criteria they have. So you see, you always work with moral frameworks. You work with the value that is set, with the criterions that are set, and then with arguments, hold contentions that are trying to achieve that. And this is what you evaluate as a judge, right? So in policy, you have the criterions, but you're trying to see, as written in on the screen. I will also, of course, share this with you, right? You think of topicality. Does the affirmative plan reasonably address what the topic's limitations are? Do they address the problem that exists? Significance. Is there a justification to change from the present system, right? I mean, if somebody's suggesting a policy, if I don't see no issue, I'm like, look, I'm not listening about your great plan. If I don't see an issue in status quo, I don't care, right? Inherency, right? Do we have a real problem in status quo that is preventing status quo? To just resolve the issues itself. Solvency. Is the policy that they are suggesting actually solving the issue? And simply advantages and disadvantages that happens. Comparative of harms and benefits, if you wish. You can also simply, I think, much easier way of thinking of how to judge policy is, well, I have one policy on that side. I will probably have another policy counter plan on the other side, or I will have somebody defending status quo. So it's very easy. I have policy that is changing status quo. I have a different proposal on how to change status quo, or I have status quo. And now we will discuss which is better. Based on evidence, speaking of the solvency that the policy suggests. Lincoln Douglas, frameworks, right? Value that they want to achieve. Do they say why that value is great? Do they explain how they get how they evaluate that value through criterions? Do they have contentions proving that on their side of the house, their side of the topic, they are achieving their own value? On the other side, they can challenge value, criterion, or say that they agree with that framework, but that they are simply their side is better achieving that. In parliamentary, anything can happen. Big clash, comparison, what the debaters tell you, very conversational. Try to simply see which world in the end is better. They can run value case, they can run policy. It's about what they interpret. Okay, so many things I want to tell you. Okay, let's go clearly, quickly. What is a good argument? Generally applicable for all the formats. We already went through how to use evidence, right? Let's go generally through how do we analyze whether argument is good. right? Number one, is the argument clear? A lot of ideas of how to build a good argument. But what every argument needs, some sort of thesis. Did they tell you what are they proving? Some sort of explanation. Why is that true? Some sort of evidence, explanation, some warrants, different types, different, strength in different formats, but they need something from real life, at least an anecdote. And then impact, like, why is this relevant? Like, how does this prove the motion, right? So this is what every argument needs. So if you ask yourself, was that a good argument? First, you can ask, okay, was it clear? Secondly, were there hidden logical assumptions? So if you can ask yourself, what about that? Something was not proven. If you find that, even if the other team does not point it out, you can say argument was not well proven. Some assumptions were still there. Of course, you can't, say that's why you lose because you didn't prove me that. If the other team doesn't say that, on comparison, that argument is standing. But when you're analyzing the quality, there might be logical assumptions. For example, if I say black market will happen, why? I have 2 points of analysis. Because there will be demand for, I don't know, cigarettes or tobacco. If we make it illegal, there will be demand. And secondly, we see that the states and governments are always simply bad at controlling black market, right? So that's why I think it will happen. You will easily see, well, kind of, there is another assumption that there will be supply. Like, did they prove me that there will be people who will produce that? I mean, probably they will, but there was a hidden assumption. So the other team can, call them out on that, or you can say not all like easily accessible hidden assumptions were there. Is the impact or argument that they are talking about unique? Easy question that you can always ask yourself when you're evaluating the strength of the analysis. For example, stupid, simple examples. If I say, I am against the ban of animal zoos, right? Primary school topic, right? If I'm against the ban of animal zoos because they have big educational value, right? Because kids learn things there. Well, what's the thing with that argument? The impact is not unique. They might have educational value, so the impact is correct. However, well, you can also teach kids about animals elsewhere, not necessarily only in zoos, right? So it's not uniquely connected to the topic. How strong is the link? How very sure they are that they have proven something, right? So I don't know. Let's say uh, you need to the policy that we are proposing is that Miha needs to turn off all of his lights in his apartment because he's contributing to climate change. Well, that is true. I probably am, right? I mean, I'm not fighting now whether the climate change exists or not. I don't care. Let's say that I agree with that. However, there is a link, but how strong is the link? How very impactful are my lights in contributing to climate change, right? If I turn them off, because that's the policy suggested, will anything change? So there might be a logical link, but not a strong connection. So that could be the evaluation of the argument. Then how very inherent is the impact, right? Because debaters usually do argument that something just can happen. Is it logically possible? If we ban tobacco, well, the black market can happen because people will still want it. Well, duh, I know it's logically possible that the black market can happen, but it's not just okay to show me it's possible. Try to show me that it's likely to happen. So if debaters use the language in their analysis, such as it is very likely that people will still want to buy tobacco because X reasons. It is still likely that there will be a supply because X reasons, right? Right. So this is then the argument is not talking just about logical possibility, but also probability. Well, if they can prove it, that something will 100% happen, that's a necessity, right? That the only way to restore the democratic, speaking of the value of democracy and the value of private property is not to have violent protests. Why? Because by definition and the very necessity of violence, you do violate like people's autonomy or private property, because otherwise there is no violence, right? You need to do something bad to the property or to the other person. So by the very definition of, using violence at a democratic protest or protest in democracy, you're going to, violate one of the principles. So it's not just a possibility. It's not just, well, likely it will happen. Like one of these two principles, private property or autonomy, is going to be violated. Huh? Now the question is, how strong is the link, right? Is it going to be validated a lot or just a bit? Okay, then the use of evidence and examples. What I would just want to add here is, in any format, make sure, of course, look at the citations, read the rules, how they need to present, did they follow up to the rules, and so on. But how I want you to think of like generally analyzing evidence example is, number one, completeness. Did they read or explain enough for you to know what's happening? So if debaters say, as we have seen in the example of financial crash in 2008, I'm like, sorry, I didn't see anything, right? I need you to explain me what happened. If you just, so this is what makes an evidence quality evidence. If they quote it and explain it so that it's complete, so that I know what's happening, because otherwise it's just an appeal to authority. And then integration. Do they explain why it is relevant for the topic? Just to give you an example that is not of how the evidence could not be relevant. Let's take a simple stupid one. Smoking is bad for humans. Why? Because we have a big trend of more people with lung cancer in hospitals. Well, I feel bad for them. I hope we somehow solve this issue. But just because we have more people with lung cancer in hospitals, that doesn't mean smoking is bad. So they didn't integrate, this evidence in their case. They need a bit more explanation. So that's a question that you can ask yourself while analyzing things. And then, of course, right, the argument, if, thinking of argumentative clashes, in the end, the argument, if it is not responded to, it might be bad argument for the reasons because of things are not done as they are explained here. However, it is standing in the end of the round. Okay, let's go quickly through evaluating refutation and engagement. Few things. Number one, clarity. So same as for the argument, refutation needs to be clear. So what does make refutation, engagement, responding to arguments clear? Well, if they at least say which argument they are responding to. So this is their job. I don't want, debaters sometimes start saying, oh, and I have example about this, and this statistics. And I'm like, wait, what, like looking at my notes, what are they responding to? I don't want, that's their job, not mine, right? So like the good, clear refutation is if you know all the time, what are they refuting? Why are they refuting? And so on. Second, consistency. A lot of times debaters, right? Some of them, I think I see on the screen, did that also in the exercise that I was doing with them. They make a good refutation that destroys the argument on the other team, but it also destroys one of their own argument because they're not consistent with it, right? I think I don't remember what the exact example was with some of the students here, but I remember one debate, something on there should be more women on CEO boards or affirmative action. These classic debates, right, that were very popular for some time now, and one team said, oh, we would have like at least like a lot of them, right, and we want to build role models for little girls. Then the other team said, oh, but you're violating individual right of males that are educated, that didn't do anything bad and now will not get on the board. And then the other speaker said, oh, you know what? We are only going to take women if they are equally qualified as males, and then we're going to take them. And that's going to be a very low amount. So, don't be bothered with limiting the rights of males. Okay, that's a good response to the male argument. However, is the whole point of the government team that they are creating a lot of role models? They're going to have so many women that all the girls will wake up and will say, oh my, we also want to do it. And I'm like, now, okay, is this consistent with what you want to do? Right? So make sure, like, if they have good response, but it's not fully consistent with what they say, be clear on that. Strategy, right? Strategy is simply a question, are they responding to the most important things? Right? I mean, sometimes, the other team has a good explanation, few evidences in, and then one debater is just describing one evidence and destroying one evidence, not the other things. Could be okay if this is the strongest evidence the other team has. Could be very bad if maybe that's not the strongest one. So good strategy, it means the debaters respond to the most important thing in the round and that they are able to say why these are the most important things. Now, in refutation, as being one of the most important criterions, you also have them on the ballot. You can also always evaluate diversification of refutation strategies. Well, that sounds complicated. Okay, so diversification of refutation strategies. So what does that mean? It means that there are many different ways how debaters can respond to the argument. They can, say it is untrue what they are claiming. They attack the truth. They can explain that there is a logic link missing, right? Just because something happening doesn't mean that the impact will follow, right? They could say, well, what they're saying is true, but that's actually good for us. They can turn the argument. They can say, okay, maybe they are right in what they're saying, but that's not important. We have a different criterion of how we want to evaluate this debate. They can say that the argument is not relevant. They can attack the evidence. I will not now go into details, would love to, right? Because these are strategies of how to respond. Just you can always think of adding more marks, like, or see the argument as better if the refutation is diversified. Analysis, it's important in refutation. How to judge analysis in refutation? Well, the same as you're judging it in argument development. Why? Because refutation is pretty much developing a new argument. Just the aim of the argument is to destroy the other argument. So you can go back. Does the refutation have a thesis? Does it have an explanation? And so on, right? And keep in mind that also rebuilding is important in debate. What is rebuilding? It means that that they refute what the other team said about their own arguments. They refute the refutation, right? So we said that. They said, oh, let's say, we said it's animal zoos should exist because they are so very educational. The neck team said, well, not truly unique because you can educate kids in any other way. Now, what you can say, look, we had an educational impact. They said it's not unique. Now we're going to tell you what is the unique feature of this educational impact. It's the only possible educational setting where kids can, see animals live, right? Because not everybody can go to safari. You can't touch animals in safari, I assume, right? Or at least it's very dangerous. So that's the only safe, accessible environment where you can get to animals. So that's a unique educational feature. So this is how we refute their refutation and restore our point, right? So that's also important in let's say refutation. Okay, I'm speaking for too long now. One thing I want to tell you, and then we can speak about whatever questions you're going to have. How to make a decision, and also how to then structure your reason for decision. I wanna end with that. I think that there are many different ways. How you gonna lead your thought process while you're deciding. I think that the little form that you got from the tournament administration is very nice. It leads you, oh, that was the clash and so on, right? So go through that. I think it's brilliant. The way I suggest you to lead this process would be to 3 steps. Firstly, identify main clashes and issues in the debate. So don't just think of arguments, think of what were the clashes in the round, right? Okay. Now, like how do you find what the clashes were? Well, very easy. Firstly, debaters need to tell you explicitly. Like literally debaters need to tell you, okay, they are not going to call it clashes all the time or issues, right? Probably they are going to do that in parliamentary, in LD and policy. They will like maybe address it differently, but they will talk about disagreements that exist in debate. Now, how do you find what were the main issues for your decision making, right? What clashes? Firstly, debaters will tell you, we think that was the most important clash. Now, how do you know if that was truly the most important clash? Well, just see who explained to you better, who was more convincing in saying why this was more important clash. So judge the debate on what was the most important clash. They need to tell you that. A lot of times they don't. Many times they don't. Often they don't. So secondly, Maybe if they don't tell you this explicitly, they tell you this implicitly. What does it mean that they tell you this implicitly? Well, if one team in the last speech, or one speaker in the last speech, spends 80% of time on the question of one disadvantage and 20% of time talking about the counter plan and which one is better, well, they implicitly tell you that they simply believe that one clash is more important because they spend 80% of time on it. So you don't need to say, oh, because this debater told me. You can say, because the time spent, the way you organized your speeches, the way you made strategical decisions gave me the impression I'm now not reading into the debate. I'm not making my own choice. I'm just thinking what happened. Gave me the expression that this seemed to be important. Well, if they don't do that, your first go-to will be motion and format always demand something, right? So if you're in policy, and they don't tell you anything, they don't give you any issues, any clashes. Well, then you go back to what we addressed today. Okay, is there a disadvantage explained on opposition or negative, right? Is there some sort of counter plan on, like, then you just go through basic things on how cases are built. I didn't have more time to go with all of the case building in all the formats, but just go through basic demands of the format and simply try to find things, right, that the format demands. Only lastly, you do your neutral evaluation. If you even can't come up with anything from looking at the motion and coming up with clashes, only then you will need to say, okay, I see three arguments and it seems that there are two disagreements in this debate. But that is last thing that you do, that you read in the clashes. Then, second question, who won the clashes? Very easy. Firstly, you make a summary of what both teams said under the clashes, and you decide who won. Like the way, how you make this decision, you see what a constructive was at the beginning and see the responses that happened. Was there a rebuild? If there wasn't a rebuild, then the argument was dropped, fallen. If there was a rebuild, was there a refutation back again? So you can go firstly name contentions, all these things, and decide who wins. Then you weigh the clashes. Sometimes you have more issues in debate, and one team wins one clash, one team win the other clash, and the third clash nobody wins. So I need to decide which clash is more important, right? Not just what are the main issues, also which one is more important. You do the same as with the first one. Debaters will tell you which one is more important, and then the same thing as we did before. Like, okay, now let's try to do this with the example that I did with debaters, and this is the example that I'm using a lot to explain that briefly. That was from one actual tournament that I was judging. It was a demo debate, parley debate. This house would ban private schools, right? And these were the clashes that debaters told me as a judge about, right? First clash was the clash of what is more fair. Government was saying private schools are unfair and give unfair advantage for rich people because they're better and only rich can get in. Opposition was saying, oh, you are limiting the school choice. You're limiting the freedom to establish, create the school you wish, and you're limiting the freedom, mostly that, of parents to send their children to whichever kids school they wish. Just because they're rich, we shouldn't penalize them so that they are not able to send them where they wish. Second clash, quality. Government was saying quality of public schools will increase. Why? They said they gave only one reason for why. Well, because rich kids are now going to go to public schools and somehow quality will increase. Opposition said no school will ever be as good as bad private schools today because there is so much, investment in them, so you can get good teachers, get best infrastructure, and so on. So that was the second clash. Third clash, social harmony. Government was saying rich and poor people will mix. That's why there will be less social division. Opposition said, to quote, rich people will hate the poor people and vice versa. They're not going to like each other, right? So there will be less social harmony. This is what they said. Now, I will tell you a bit now, just one more addition on how did they try to compare these clashes, right? So government said that unfair advantage for rich people is true. Opposition said, well, school choice is also important. However, the government also responded by saying that they are defending the rights of poor people that has less power and need more help. Op didn't say anything. They just say school choice is also violated. Second clash, quality of public schools will increase, right? They didn't give any explanation just because rich people are going to go there. Opposition said no school will ever be as private as these schools now because there is more money. So how did I now evaluate the first and second clash? I said the first clash, I believe, was won by the government. Why? Because I get two principles on both sides. I get the principle of school choice and freedom is violated on op, the principle of fairness or unfair advantage for rich people is here. So we have two principles. I didn't get any comparative analysis on which principle is better or more important, and I shouldn't decide about that. But as I told you in the last speech, I did get this one-liner from government, which said that they are, if both principles are important, they should win the principal clash. Why? Because they're helping poor people who have less power. There is more poor people than rich people, and also that these people needs more protection because they have less power. So there is more, they said, and they need more protection. Opposition did not respond to that. They said, yes, but school choice is important. So I said, look, I cannot tell you which principle is more important, right? You both agreed that both of the principles are violated on different sides. However, one team gave me a bit of comparative analysis why one principle should win. So regardless of my personal bias or my personal position, I award this clash to government. Second clash, I awarded to opposition. Why? Because government said quality of public schools will increase. Why? Well, because rich people will go. Now, I knew exactly what their analysis is. Their analysis was rich people are going to, try to make public schools good because their kids will need to go there. And that's why they will donate. That's why they will invest in public schools. I know that that was their logic, but they didn't say it. So I was like, that's now on the level of statement. Then I said on the other side, opposition saying no school will ever be as good as best private schools. Now, why? Because these schools have so much money for infrastructure, for good teachers to innovate and all this. So I had two statements. I had much more analysis on one side, just a statement on the other. So I awarded this clash to op. And then on social harmony, I said, I think that this clash does not go to any of the teams, right? Because I said, you're saying rich people and poor people will mix. And the only reasoning why, well, because they're from different social classes. And now when they will be in one school, they will just mix and that will be nice. So I see the logic. They gave me some ideas of how people, if they spend time together, they start liking each other and are used to each other. Then on the other side, the other team said yes, but now because they come from different backgrounds, they will not like each other, they will not understand each other. So I said, look, none of you convinced me on that. So I said the first clash goes to gov, second clash goes to op, third clash was a wash. None of the teams convinced me in anything. So now I know what were the main clashes because luckily they told me that. Secondly, I know who won which clashes. So now I, as a judge, needed to decide which clash is more important, right? And here, right, I must say that I, as a philosopher, would probably go with fairness very quickly, right? Fairness principality. However, that was a parliamentary debate, right? So I'm not necessarily going with moral frameworks or anything. So I was like, okay, let me look. Did debaters tell me anything about what is more important, quality of education or fairness? And I found out on my notes that government was saying fairness, its principality and all this. So that's why this is the most important clash. Opposition said that when they were talking about quality, they said that if we have good quality schools, maybe we will educate people so well that they will feel more empathetic to others, that they will raise the economy because of inventions, and that this will be good for everybody. So maybe even for the poor, this will be better, and we will live in more fair society. Now, I think that's wishful thinking. I don't think that was proven. However, at that point, I kind of seen that none of the teams told me which clash is more important. So I cannot jump in and read into the debate. I cannot make a decision for myself. And I realized that I do have some unrefuted analysis on why quality is more important than fairness. Why? Because quality can lead to more fairness. Because if you have best schools, on a long run, you can create a system that will be more fair because you'll go have more people that will have elite education. Now, I maybe disagree with that philosophically and politically or whatever. Maybe the other team has a good answer, but they didn't give it. And because that was the only thing, I now had an answer why debaters think that quality is more important clash. And that's why I said Gov wins fairness, op wins quality, nobody wins social harmony, because op told me that out of quality, in the end, it's not necessary that you get, it's not likely, but it's possible that you get more fairness. But government never told me that out of fairness also quality of education comes. For this reason, I decided the quality in this debate, as debated by debaters, is more important. That's why I award the win to the government, to the opposition in the round, right? So this was now going through all the three steps: identifying, deciding who wins, and then weighing. And also now you have seen me kind of explaining that, very similar to how you have it on your note, right? Now I did it in I'll be honest with you, I think I did it quite well, right? In a sense, I explained it well, right? Nobody expects from you that you're going to do it like, in like quickly in that way, but that's what you're aiming for, using that language and using that thought process. So I will stop sharing here because I took you absolutely too much time. And I do have 15 minutes to ask any questions, concerns, critiques, requests, whatever. So just, hit me up and I'll respond. Otherwise, I'm giving it to Kimberly to, tell us what to do.
I'll just jump in real quick. Thank you so much, Miha. That was wonderful. I got lots and lots of notes. So let's do this for questions. If you have a question, if you could raise your hand, and then Miha, you can kind of see in case we have, too many questions that come in at one time. And then Miha he'll be able to see you raise your hand. If you don't know how to raise your hand, you go down to the react button at the bottom. And
while we are maybe waiting for that, just additional note, right? Something on scoring, right? So every speaker can have 30 points, right? Because for each category, as you can see on your ballot, you can give 1 to 5 points. Now, look, the only thing that is important in scoring is that there is consistency within the tournament, right? So I don't care if at this tournament, the best speaker in the end will have the average of 5 points, because you really give low points to everybody, right? And then next tournament, the best speaker is going to have 30 average. That's not a problem, because you're not comparing speakers over the tournaments. If you're not running a league, right? If you're running a league, that's important, right? But if you're running independent tournament, most important thing is that there is a consistency within the tournament. So you might get, if you go to different tournaments with different organizers, you may get a bit different interpretation of how to do speaker points. I will do an interpretation that was a follow-up to what Ms. Kimberly was talking about in the instruction video, right? She said that if the debater did average performance on one of the category, you give them 3 points for that category, which means that the average speaker of this tournament is going to get 18 points for their speech, right? That's just following, right? The idea that we got there. Now, why am I telling you this? Because you can help yourself with the following technique, how I help myself. Look, now I know the best one is going to get 18. Now I also know that if I give 4 points in each category for the speaker, so that's very good speech already, right? Because they're almost excellent and the best in every category. They're going to get 24 points if my math is correct, right? So 24 points is already very good speech. Everything like after 24 is then almost exceptional, right? So now this is how I help myself with. So average 18, anything that's below, they are not even average. 24, very good. Anything above, exceptional. Now, two little cheat codes that I have personally. Cheat code number one is I always, when I hear a debater, right, before I go into every little category, persuasiveness, refutation, I just look at what this debater did according to all the criterions. And I think, okay, if this debater repeats the same speech at every debate in this tournament, is this debater going to be the best speaker in the end? If the answer is yes, if you're like, oh my God, this student just made a speech, and if they repeat this speech, they need to be one of the top 5 speakers. Well, then you need to give them near 30, right? Because they are exceptional. If you think that, this debater could be, high in the top speakers rank, right? I would not be surprised if they get an award, but also, I don't know, I'll see, maybe they should do a bit better. Then you will be around 24. If you see a debater and you would be like, that's an average person, right? Probably they are going to be somewhere in the middle. Then you give them 18. So that's one little trick that you can use, right? Second little trick that I use, I give average points if basic roles of the speaker are fulfilled. I look at the format rules, what each speaker should do, and if this speaker brings new argument, refute, and does all that, and if I understand what the speaker did according to what was expected by the speaker in the debate, I'm like, look, I think that's average. You did everything needed, but nothing more. And then I start thinking, right? Did they do something very well, or maybe even exceptional? Was one refutation very good and was brilliant? Then I go above. If they did something bad, if they missed something that they should do, if they didn't respond to everything, if they dropped their own argument, then I go down. So that is my little help that I have with assigning speaker points, right? So firstly, thinking of where this debater is going to end if they have the similar speech throughout the whole tournament. And then secondly, average for me usually is basic role is fulfilled, nothing special, everything's done. But be careful, right? Sometimes judges, chief adjudicators, directors of the tournaments might say, oh guys, for whatever reason we decided for this tournament, average is going to be 23. Right? Just don't get bothered by that. The scale sometimes changes for whatever reasons, different traditions, different advices. But keep in mind, everything else is still the same. It's just where you set the average and where you set the best, and where do you have the scale, right? And following from the video that we got, right, that average mark is 3 for each category. This is what follows. But that could always be changed. Just what I wanted to give you on scoring is, how you assign these scores. Now, what's the little trick that I'm using? Okay. Any questions in between?
Miha, if we don't have any yet, we have a question. Is back at the beginning, you were talking about a comparative explanation. Could you give us another example of that? So if we're sitting there judging, what are we looking for inside of a comparative explanation?
Okay, so first thing I would say, not to complicate it too much. Like my first go-to explanation would be just make sure to use comparative language. Right? So when you are thinking of who wins the round, and when you are explaining of who won the round, you are not saying you did that bad. That was a mistake. You need to say, because you did that, you were not able to convince me that their argument is wrong, or you were not able to convince me that quality of the schools will be better, or you were not able to convince me that you win this clash. So it all, like, whatever you say in feedback, in a reason for decision, or when you are thinking about the round, it should always be like in a sense of why this thing that you're mentioning, like in comparison to what the other team had, was not enough for something in terms of big debate, right? So to go to the little debate that we had, like or the 3 clashes that I was observing, right? So what I said is, right, to comparative language, I would say, got both of the teams on the clash of fairness, both of the teams at the beginning presented well-analyzed arguments with some evidence and some value background for their side. Government said that private schools create unfair advantage for rich people. Opposition did not dispute that fact. They said it is correct. However, banning private schools violates the school choice principle. So there another violation happens. So at that point, comparatively, I had as a judge two principles that were not disputed, that both teams agree exist on both sides, and there was no comparison in between. Later on in the round, I did not see refutation of any of the arguments, like direct saying that they are untrue, and I did not see direct engagement which of the principles in terms of fairness is more important. However, in the last intervention on government, I did get a very short and underdeveloped analysis. So now I'm criticizing them. Underdeveloped analysis. Oh, you need to take care for the poor. The ache is they're pouring because there is more of them. I got that analysis. I got no response to that analysis in the opposition. Even though I think that that analysis was not developed, was not explained, was not, substantiated, it was existing there. The other team had a chance to respond that they didn't. So now I, as a judge, when I need to decide which side is more fair, because you both agree that fairness is a big question, which side has a more important principle, because you both agree that both principles stand, I now will take this small little analysis that was given by government on the reason why to prioritize unfair advantage, because you want to protect the poor, because that seems fair, versus school choice, because I have no justification why to prioritize this over the other. So even though it is underanalyzed and not well developed, there is more on otherwise very equal clash. So that's why on a close margin, I give this clash to the government. So this was now a comparative explanation where I was also bringing in things that I think they did wrong. I said they didn't refute. I said you underdeveloped. So I was telling them that's bad, but I told them how in the end, comparatively in my head, with regardless of what I personally believe or what my preconceived ideas are or what my philosophical positions are, why this made me give this clash to them. However, right, then I would say, as I have told you before, I awarded second clash on quality to the opposition. So now, debaters, I am, faced with a question, which clash should be more important in this debate? Because I think that one team won one clash, the other team won another clash. And then I would do the same. What did teams told me on what is more important, right? And I hope, luckily, they, in this case, did give me something. If they wouldn't give me anything, I would need to search implicit information. Did they spend more time in the whole debate on fairness or on quality, right? And yeah. So and then lastly, if they would spend equal amount of time on fairness and on quality, I would need to go to the debate format. If that would be value debate, right? That would be LD. Probably that would be an easy, if they would not say anything else, that would be easier win for Gov probably, right? AF, right? Because they have a clear value creation. I would not say, well, because you're an LD, you win. No, I would say in LD, we judge according to value frameworks. You have a clear value framework because you win on fairness. Like you have a one like negative impact on quality, but you lack of like principle standing because you lost the school choice principle framework. So that's why I'm awarding it there. If that would be policy, I'll say, well, look, I need to judge as a policymaker. I have something on quality, neg wins quality, so I'm giving it there because I don't want to deal with principle. Like I need to see solvency, right? But this would happen only if debaters would not tell me anything, and I would need to, from up, I personally would need to come up with something, right? This is where I would revert to what I expect from debaters, or what are the expected burdens from debaters within the format, right? So that would be I hope that answers a bit.
That does. Thank you so much. We have another question, but I'll let somebody else have a turn. All right, Miha, I'm just going to keep asking you questions. Let's see.
Please do.
We have obviously some experienced parents here, but we also have a lot of parents that are just beginning in debate and beginning in some of the types of debate,
Mhm.
and community judges that are just beginning.
Mhm.
So when flowing,
Mhm.
when you're sitting listening, and I liked how you start at the beginning of, listening, let the debaters convince you. But sometimes I think when you first start, you're like, oh my, I got to write down every single thing.
Mhm.
Any suggestions as you begin to flow, and like, what would you
Mhm.
capture?
Yeah. So I think here I'll disappoint you with not being very innovative. I think that what was sent to I assume all participants here, at least they have access to that. My advice would be the same, right? So what I do is I have like a linear flow that was shown in the wait, maybe I can even show it here. What yeah, that was showed in the video, right? When you follow argument by argument. So I think that is the wait, I'm just looking at this. If I can find it, I'll share it because I think it was really good. Oh yeah, wait, give me a second. I will share it. I truly think that I think you see my screen, right? So this is literally how I would suggest flowing, right? You simply start with whatever the format is. You write down points. Maybe you don't even need to write down arguments. You just write down points, right? If you are in Lincoln Douglas, they will, oh, we have a value. Now you are, oh, I forgot. Is this a point? Is this a contention? What's the jargon? You don't care, right? Write down. They are speaking about some sort of value. Write down value democracy. Then, go like then make, whatever points they make. And then I would suggest that you keep track on what is happening with every point, right? I literally make horizontal lines and simply follow what's happening with each point. What was the response, and was there any response back? Now, of course, I think that it's much better to just make notes, little bullet points, than transcribe everything, um, because there's like every learning and pedagogical theory is going to tell you that those who want to, while listening to a teacher or lecture, transcribe everything, they are not learning well, right? The point is that while you are trying to write something down, right, in a bullet point, you already kind of analyze it in a second. So this is where you try to get. I know it's hard at the beginning. I would suggest do not try to write out, like, even if you want to, if you feel the urge, don't do that. Maybe if you wish, because I know that the tournament is applying the judges' paradigms and judges' philosophies, right? If you're a new judge, like, tell them that I'm a new judge. I have hard times following. This is like my paradigm. You need to make sure I'll remember stuff because I have hard time writing down everything. So make sure that you signpost. Make sure that you tell me the point is now done. I'm now moving to next point. That could be your paradigm. That could be your judging philosophy. One of the things I, as a judge, prioritize is clarity and pace and signposting because, I'm not well experienced in note taking. That is perfectly fine to say, in my opinion, right? So you can tell them this. Don't like do not try to write everything down, like, for whatever happens. If you're were not able to write things down, and if you lose train of thought, or if you lose the speech, what do? Immediately you make a, like, some sort of X, start with where they are now, and what you do there, literally make a question mark and say, well, I was not able to follow. I mean, this is what happened. So you were not able to follow. That was their mistake because you were not able to follow. And secondly, if the first speaker that comes after that, on both sides, if going to do good job, if they're going to be clear in refutation and rebuilding, they will redo the point. They will say, on the point that had this evidence and said this and this, our response is, and then you will get you will get that back. So make sure that you don't try to catch them. If you're lost, scratch, start with where they are now. B, you can always try to retrack it back a bit when second, third, next speech is happening. C, that could be your feedback to debaters. I simply lost train of thought. And lastly, yeah, you could explain them that you are new, or if you don't feel comfortable saying that you are new, you just say, I respect clarity. I want you to be very good in signposting, because the important thing for me is that I can write everything down. Yeah, otherwise it's exercise, of course, but I would say, right. I mean, look, my how I try to explain this. I did short anecdote, I promise. I did I think 5 days judges training for new parents in Houston, no, in Dallas, Texas. And it was for the time when I think the Trump-Biden debate happened, when Trump was still running. So what we did is, they were also very, how are we going to follow this? Not the Trump-Biden debate, but the competitive debates. And I said, okay, let's today in the evening, let's watch this Trump-Biden debate, and let's make some notes, and for the funs of it, tomorrow discuss, make notes. Nobody made notes with transcription of everything they said. Nobody. They all made some bullet points, and they were all able to discuss the debate next day. After a full night, people, parents, new judges, never done debate, they all pull up their notes, and they're like, oh yeah, then the response was that and that. And I was like, guys, you literally just, after a whole night, were giving me a summary of debate, and nobody wrote a transcription of what they were saying. So don't be like overstressed because you're judging a competition. You are literally listening to like relatively young kids discussing like some topics. So make notes what they are saying. Like, don't, like, I would say, don't be too nervous. That would be my response. Yeah.
Thank you. That was fantastic, Miha. Okay, is there anybody else that has any questions? I know we're getting to the end of time. I just wanted to make sure that we open the floor if anybody's got any specific questions.
Of course.
And we will send Miha's information, contact information out after if you do have additional questions, or if you want to reach out to him for something as well.
I wanted to ask a quick question about going back to the issue of speaker points and finding the average of speaker points in a tournament. What do you think is the best way to talk to new judges coming in for the first time? Because many of them, I think, they go in their first round with beginner debaters and think what they're doing is just amazing. And they're like 30 all the way. That was excellent. And then you get a parent who's judging more experienced debaters who's like, I've seen better. What's a good way to balance out that problem?
So there, I see now two approaches I've seen. I like one, I don't like the other one, or I don't think it's as effective. So I use one and do not use the other, but I know some people are. So what some people do, especially if there is a tournament with more than 3 debates, right? What they do is they take in the speaker points in the tab, they take the highest and they take the high-low out, right? So they don't take the averages, and they don't have high loads just as a tiebreaker if people have same average. They initially take out high-low. So then, they kind of fix for that issue. And what they do is, if they're constantly tracking whether these are novices or advanced kids, and when they see that some people gave high points to novices or vice versa or something, they call them in, explain them, right, what's happening. So speak with them, like have a little follow-up, maybe make them be a trainee judge for one, like speak with them to readjust for next round. And then with a high-low, they make sure that the tap is not disturbed. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's just too complicated and not fair necessarily. So the best thing that I think that works is, what I do is I ask debaters. I give to judges to watch. And I said, this is the speech that we are setting as average speech. This is the speech that we are setting for exceptional speech. This is the speech that we are setting for below average. Then in the judges training, if I do have time, I briefly go through these speeches and explain why one is average and not, so that they are not, like, again, too rigid. But this is what, in my opinion, works the best. Because you know, those who are a bit experienced, they can adapt when they get informations at briefing, but those who are fully new, that works for them because they have exactly what you are saying. They don't some sort of comparison, right? So I think that's the best. The only practical issue here is that it's sometimes hard to get recordings that people would agree with, that are being sent around for educational purposes. But yeah, I always somehow, I know, deal with that gets parents' approval, or that maybe we, you know, select kids specifically who are going to perform that. But yeah, I know that's the issue. But yeah, so that would be the thing. Alternative that I did sometimes when I was not able to get appropriate samples of speeches for that, you know, private information sharing and these reasons. What I did is I created a transcript of a speech that would be average, below average, and exceptional or very good, right? And then I just put it in the GDocs, and I even made comments. You know, that was a mistake here. So like in comment section, they kind of have the possible evaluation of the speech, so that also gave them the impression what they can feedback, in which direction they should go. And they also got some sort of perception of what a good speech is, what the average is. However, of course, it's not a spoken word, it's different. But that was one of the things that I did. Yeah, hope it helps a bit. But that's eternal issue always, right? When you have new judges, it's always like that. So, okay, the last thing, which is usually not possible due to the tournament's limitations, but the last thing, that's what I always do, if possible, is all the new judges are trainees the first round, right? So if you can do that, right, if you can suffer the first round somehow, right, and still have debates going on with judges who did judge at least once before, and make all the other judges trainee judges, just so they see one round, they see the points, then that also solves the situation perfectly. But I know that's hard to do because we don't have judges usually. Yeah, or like last alternative, like what we could do instead of such training is, right, we could have online debate, listening to students that were even present, right, looking at us now there, right, they could perform, and we could together like do an evaluation, right? So that's not a recording of a student that is being sent around, but it's like probably a bit limited because you can't send this recording then around, blah blah. But again, all the people that are here, we could do a short evaluation. It would take a bit long time, because we would probably need to do all the 3 formats so that new judges would not get totally confused, right? But yeah, that's the last alternative, I'd say.
I have a really quick question.
Yeah.
This is a completely different format for our tournaments. So in going through this, we're going to whoever's sitting in the room, do they hear the judges' feedback, or is it only for the debaters? And then after we've gone through this training, what if we're like looking at our buddy and we're like, hey, you didn't really judge that according to the way we learned Sunday night. How do you manage that sort of thing? And
I would say, so that I think that's a brilliant question. I would say that I don't want to answer this. I mean, I have my strong position on that, and when I'm organizing the tournament or running camp, I have my position on how to deal with that. However, I think that's a tournament director or administrator question, because it's on procedures and rules. So I will give that to Kimberly if you want to answer now, or maybe later through emails. But I think it's a good question, so that you know how to proceed. But I think that's a question for, because it's not a debate methodology question. It's more of how you want to run the tournament with procedure question. So since I'm not organizing the tournament or leading it, yeah, Kimberly, that would be for you.
Jump in real quick. I just wanted to make sure I understood the question, and thank you for that. And so if I could repeat it back to you to make sure I understand. So your question is if so two questions I understood. The first one is, when you give your reason for decision, is everybody in the room listening? Can they have spectators and listening to the room? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, that is one of my questions.
So that's the first one, is usually yes. I would say, as the judge, if you're not comfortable with it, you can send them out. So that's,
Okay.
you say, hey, I'm not comfortable with spectators in here. I just want to talk to the debaters. I need everybody to go. You're in charge of the room. So that's number one. Number two, I think the question was, is if you said somebody else judged around and then you said, hey, I don't think you judged that according to the rules. I think this really goes back to what Miha said. And you as the judge in there, we are going to go with the judge. Right. So everybody is there doing the very best they can with the training they have and their understanding. And so maybe at different levels. But I think what was so encouraging is what Miha said is, hey, everybody flowed this round the night before, brand new parent judges, and came and we're all able to discuss it. You know, and so part of the power of parent judges and power of community judges is what they hear, and then our debaters being able to speak that back. So
Discussing it and deciding it are two different things, though. So that's where I'm kind of like,
Okay, I
how
can.
do we eliminate? Because my understanding of this tournament, and maybe I have the wrong understanding, is to try and like a little different format than what we typically do, and maybe getting a little clearer judging. But if we're bringing our same ideology, but just saying it out loud this time instead of just writing it on the ballot, how is it going to be different? I guess is my question too.
oh, Miha, let me say something, then I would love for you to jump on. So it is the same. It's the same. This is a
Okay.
debate just like we always have. And everything that Miha is saying, I think that we all know who have been here for a while, is it's more depth that continues to educate us as parents,
Mm-hmm.
analyze an argument. And I think this challenges us as parents. Like, one of the things as I was listening to him is us presenting a comparative is so powerful to these guys.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the purpose of this tournament was really to help our students prepare for Nighthawk, for national,
Mm-hmm.
and to give them the advantage of being in a sport where they're getting feedback between every round. So now they can take that, take it into the next round, take it and take it into the next round. So that was the heart and the purpose behind that. And I
Okay.
think hearing something verbally from us will be so powerful for them. So that was, hopefully, did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
And then Miha, if you
Yeah.
had
Yeah. So what I would add to that majority of tournaments, international tournaments, Europe, Asia, Middle East, they do have decision in the room. I think Steve can also confirm that, because he did attend, right, some of the international tournaments recently. I know of him. I'm sorry if anybody else also did. So the reason they we do that is precisely so that you can see how the judge thought, right? Even other judges, right? But it's not the aim of that is not to criticize them, right? The aim of that is so that you can say to your kids, your debaters, like, okay, let's put it like that. What is the best parenting, mentoring, or coaching advice to a kid that loses the debate, and then you and the kid know that they lost it because a judge made a little mistake or the judge didn't understand something, right? Because that might happen, right? That happens at the World Championship, right? It happens, right? Like, the best response to that is, well, make sure that the next time you prevent that you can lose because of these mistakes the judges obviously can do, right? It's like you would say, I lost the elections for a president because voters made the mistake. Well, make sure next time in your campaign you prevent they make the same mistake, right? And I understand it's I fully understand it's competition, needs to be fair, needs to be accountable. Of course, everything needs to go in that way. But I think that's a way that's one thing how you can approach kids and say, well, look, we are going to work on our side with, educating judges as much as possible. You on your side, try to make everything that next time you prevent judges being able to do this as a decision, because you will explain them differently, you will address them differently, right? So that's one thing. And then the second thing, yes, with having new and parent judges, I think it's very valuable to them being comfortable enough to explain it openly. So yeah, I think it's fine, but I do understand. Of course, it
I
happens.
think for me, and let me just give an example of why I'm wondering how this is going to work. And one of the main reasons I wanted to come to this tournament is because some of you know I'm very interested in this format. So I kind of want to see how it works. That's why I do have questions. We received a ballot after a tournament. You know, the way we do it in STOA, you get your ballots at the end and read it. And the reason for decision against my daughter was simply the judge made herself the third debater in the round, outlined all this refutation, and said that the other debater didn't have refutation, even said, I don't even like your, and yet voted against my daughter even. And so in a situation like that, I'm just thinking and I guess that's part of coaching your kids too, is how do you go into your next round when you're like, your head's like exploding, when it's
Okay,
like,
so
that
yeah,
wasn't even a fair assessment.
I get it. I think again, this is, I don't want to answer in the name of the circuit, in the name of the tournament and so on. So I'll just give you my personal answer. The way I deal with that when I run tournaments is, for such things, I always have like an institute of a complaint, right? But the point of the complaint is not to revoke the decision or something. The decision happened. The point of this is for us to get like feedback on the judge. So one option is that this judge not judging anymore because we see that they are not capable of, or we get, like, we were in a tab room or for educating judges, we get an important information on what this judge is doing and have a conversation with this judge for the next round or next tournament. So and this is this is what we're doing while it's happening on the tournament. And it's also easier to do if you can discuss with the judge on the spot, right? Because it's happening at the time. So that's one of the things that are happening. But I fully understand. That's I can just, like, the only thing I can add from my experience is I can only disappoint you that that's the case and the issue at every tournament that does not have only like not just professional but highly experienced judges, and it also happens there. But yeah, I fully understand that issue. Yeah.
So it just happens and you just roll with it.
Well, I think that was I love that question. And I think there's a lot of parents that have the exact same question. So thank you for having the courage to voice it, because I think it's happened to everybody.
I just feel like we're going to all, like, we've had the potential to be mad through the whole tournament or something. You can be mad over in the car ride home, and then by the time you get home, you're okay, you know?
Well, I think too, but what we want to do here and what's important is we do have an adjudication process, right? And I think that if a student comes out, and this was Steve and I were just talking about, if a student comes out, it's the same process. So they come out and they say, hey, that was completely, we don't agree with that, anything. There's a process for that, right? And again, not to overturn the ruling, right? But to say, hey, where was this and how can we continue to coach? And I think that just helps us grow as a league and grow, as a, and if you think about it, it allows that process where at the end, we don't get that opportunity. We don't know that until the end. So we don't get the opportunity to talk to the judge. So it's different. And I know different is scary. And I don't know, we'll see, I'm sure we're going to have a few bumps as we go through. That was one of the reasons that we'd asked Miha to be here, because he has gone through this and I love some of the processes he has in place to help with those. And so thank you for that. Thank you for asking the question, first of all. And then thank you, Miha. We are way over time. Does anybody have a burning question, or we can let Miha go? I know he's on the East Coast, so we think we have a couple of others too. Oh, we do. Emily, you're in Virginia, I think, and so yeah. All right. Well, Miha, thank you so much. We super appreciate your time. So grateful to have you here.
My pleasure. And yeah, we can be in contact for any help that I can be, as always. My pleasure.
Wonderful.
Enjoy. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye.